For today, the main rule to remember is this. If you have x to the negative 2 power, you move it to the opposite side. Make it 1 over x to the second. When you move it to the opposite side, the exponent becomes positive. If I start out on the bottom, 1 over x to the negative second, it goes to the top and becomes x to the second. Everything today is built around those two basic rules. If you have a problem of x to the second over y to the negative third, see if you can find negative exponents first, and if you do, then move them to the other side. The x to the second does not move because it's positive, a positive x to the positive 2 power. But the y to the negative third on the bottom goes to the top and becomes y to the positive third. Here's another one on the same page. If I have x to the negative 3, y to the negative 4, you have two negative exponents on the same side. You have to move them to the opposite side. So you'll have x to the third, y to the fourth on the bottom, and since you had nothing left on the top, you put a 1. Practice problem. X to the negative fifth over y to the sixth. On the practice problem, find your negative exponents. This is a negative exponent. You move it to the bottom, becomes x to the fifth. You already had y to the sixth on the bottom. Make sure they're in alphabetical order and put a 1 on top. The solution for the bonus problem is that the 4 and 2 cancel to simply 2 on the top, and x squared over x cancels to x on the top, 2x. Another practice problem. X to the fifth over y to the negative 2 power. Solution for the practice problem. X to the fifth has a positive exponent, so it stays on the top. But y to the negative second on the bottom must move to the top and become y to the positive second. X to the fifth, y to the second. A bonus problem. The solution for the bonus is that 3 goes into 12 4 times and into 9 3 times. And then you'll have x to the fifth, the largest power, it's on the bottom. So you'll have 4 over 3 at the least, but the x is on the bottom because the largest power is there. 5 minus 4 is 1, so it's x to the first. 4 over 3x. Practice problem. X to the negative 2 over y to the negative 5. Solution for the practice problem. This has a negative exponent, so it must go to the bottom and the exponent becomes positive. This has a negative exponent. It must go to the top and the exponent becomes positive. Y to the fifth over x to the second. Bonus problem. The solution for the bonus problem. Largest power of x is on top. 4 minus 3 is 1. And largest power of y is on the bottom. 3 minus 2 is 1. X over y. Practice problem. The solution for the practice problem is that y to the sixth is on the bottom and it's a positive exponent, so it doesn't move. X to the negative fourth must go to the bottom, become x to the positive fourth. There's nothing on top, so you put a 1. Bonus problem. For the bonus problem, 12 over 12 cancels out. Your largest power of x is on the bottom. 3 minus 2 is 1. There's nothing left on the top, so you have to put a 1. 1 over x. Practice problem. not a practice, this is an example problem. 18 x to the negative fourth over 12 y to the seventh. What we're adding on now is a fraction of 18 over 12. So your first step is to reduce 18 over 12. Find the highest number that goes into 18 and 12. That would be 6. 6 into 18 3 times, into 12 twice. So you start out with a 3 over 2. And now go to your variables. Y to the seventh is positive, it doesn't move. But this x to the negative fourth must go to the bottom and become x to the positive fourth, and your y to the seventh stays down there. Make sure you put the variables in alphabetical order when they're on the same side. 3 over 2x to the fourth y to the seventh. Another example problem. This one is 28 x to the negative 2 over 24 y to the negative 3. Step 1 is to reduce this fraction if you can. The highest number that goes into both of them is 4. So that's going to become a 7. This will become a 6. You start out with 7 over 6. Now x to the negative 2 must go to the bottom, and y to the negative 3 must go to the top. 7y to the third over 6x squared. Practice problem. 25 x to the fourth over 20 y to the negative second. The solution to the practice is that 5 goes into 25 5 times and into 20 4 times. So you start out with a 5 over 4. Now x to the fourth is positive, it doesn't move. Y to the negative second goes to the top and becomes y to the positive second. Bonus problem. The solution to the bonus problem is that 8 goes into 32 4 times and into 24 3 times. So you're starting out with a 4 over 3. Largest power of x is on the top. 10 minus 5 is 5. An example problem. 4x to the negative second, y to the negative third, over 12x to the negative third, y to the negative fourth. In this case, you start with the 4 over 12. 4 into itself once, into 12 3 times. So you start out with a 3 on the bottom. No need to write the 1 yet, unless you end up with nothing on top. Now x to the negative second must go to the bottom, become a positive exponent. And then the x to the negative third from the bottom goes to the top. Exponent becomes positive. Now you still have negatives on the y's. Y to the negative third goes to the bottom, and y to the negative fourth goes to the top. Once you have that, now you have to simplify top to bottom. You have x to the third over x to the second. Highest power is on top. 3 minus 2 is 1. And then the highest power of y is on top. 4 minus 3 is 1. So xy over 3. Here's an example problem. This one is 4 x to the negative 2, y to the sixth, over 12 x to the fourth, y to the negative third. First, find everything that you can simplify with the fraction, 4 over 12. 4 into itself once, into 12 3 times. So at the least, you have a 3 on the bottom. Now, x to the negative second on the top must go to the bottom. But on the bottom, you already have x to the fourth. It does not move because it's a positive exponent. So write x to the fourth, but beside it, you have to put this x to the negative second, which becomes x to the positive second. On the top, you have a y to the sixth. It does not move. But this y to the third on the bottom goes to the top, becomes a positive exponent of 3. Now simplify whatever you can. Notice you have two y's on the top. Y to the sixth times y to the third. That's y to the ninth. Your 3 stays on the bottom. X to the fourth, x to the second is x to the sixth. Practice problem. 16x to the second, y to the fourth, over 4x to the negative second, y to the negative fourth. Solution for the practice problem. 16 over 4, that's the same as 4. It's on the top. Now you have x to the second on the top that stays, but you have this x to the negative second that goes with it. And I should probably move this down to the bottom so I have more room. This x to the second is from here, and then you have this one on the bottom that goes to the top, becomes x to the positive second. You have a y to the fourth on top that stays, but this y to the negative fourth from the bottom goes up and becomes y to the positive fourth. So the 4 stays, and this becomes x to the fourth, and this is y to the 8th. A bonus problem. On the bonus problem, 50 over 25 reduces to 2, and x squared over x squared cancels out. Y to the second is the largest y. 2 minus 1 is 1, so it's just 2 over y. Practice problem. 20 x to the negative second, y squared over 16 x to the negative second, y to the negative second. The solution for the practice. 4 goes into 20 5 times, and into 16 4 times. So you have 5 over 4 at the least. But now you have x to the negative second over x to the negative second. If you switch places with those, you'll have x to the positive 2 over x to the positive 2. Either way, it's something over itself. They both cancel out. This one will go to the top. So you'll have y to the second that's already on the top, and then this one that goes with it. So 5y to the fourth over 4 is the answer. Bonus problem. 9x to the third, y to the fifth, over 3x to the third, y to the fifth. Solution for the bonus problem. 9 over 3 is 3. But this and this cancel out. So your answer is just 3.